My son was in a car accident, and for 72 hours I sat beside his hospital bed praying he'd survive. In the next bed, separated by a thin curtain, was an elderly woman no one ever visited. I brought her coffee, listened when she spoke. On my last night there, she grabbed my hand with terrifying clarity and whispered, "Stay away from him while you still can." I thought she was confused, drugged broken by age. But 3 days after leaving that hospital, I discovered the truth and realized that warning wasn't madness. It was a countdown to my own death. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Just a quick note, this story includes some fictionalized elements added for storytelling and learning purposes. Any similarities to real people or places are purely coincidental, but the message behind it is meaningful and worth reflecting on. 72 hours. That's how long they said I'd have to wait before I'd know if my son would be okay. But what I didn't know was those 72 hours would change everything about the life I thought I had. It started like any other Tuesday afternoon in Portland. I was in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd raised 2 children, the same kitchen where my late husband Robert and I had shared 39 years of morning coffee before cancer took him 8 years ago. I was folding laundry, sorting through Blake's old baby clothes I'd been meaning to donate when my phone rang. Unknown number. At 67, I've learned that unknown numbers usually mean trouble, but something made me answer anyway. "Is this Karen Mercer speaking?" My heart dropped at the formal tone. Nobody calls me Karen unless something's wrong. My family calls me Maggie. My friends from the hospital where I worked as a nurse for 35 years call me Maggie. Even my patients used to call me Maggie. "Yes, this is she," I said, setting down one of Blake's tiny baseball uniforms. "Mrs. Mercer, this is Providence Portland Medical Center. Your son Blake Mercer has been in an accident. He's here in our emergency department." The baby clothes slipped from my hands. The uniform, the one he'd worn when he was 7 when he'd hit his first home run, and I'd cheered so loud I'd lost my voice scattered across the kitchen floor. "What?" My voice didn't sound like my own. "What happened? Is he?" "He's stable, ma'am, but you should come right away." I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember grabbing my purse or locking the door. I just remember my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition of my old Honda Accord. The car Robert and I had bought together in 2015, the last car we'd ever chosen as a couple. Blake, my son, 42 years old, married with a 10-year-old son of his own. But in that moment, driving through Portland traffic with my heart hammering against my ribs, all I could see was him at 7 years old climbing trees in our backyard. At 12, graduating from Little League. At 18, hugging me goodbye before college. The boy I'd carried for 9 months. The boy I'd brought into this world during a snowstorm in 1982, holding Robert's hand so tight I'd bruised his fingers. The boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and broken bones and teenage heartbreak. Providence Portland Medical Center sits on the east side of town, a massive brick building that had been my second home for 3.5 decades. I'd worked in the ICU on the 4th floor in pediatrics on the 2nd, and finally in the emergency department before I retired at 60. Walking through those sliding glass doors felt like stepping back in time. The antiseptic smell, the fluorescent lights reflecting off polished floors, the muted beeping of monitors filtering through half-open doors. This place held so many memories, some beautiful, some heartbreaking. I'd delivered comfort to countless families in these hallways. I'd held hands, dried tears, celebrated miracles, and mourned losses. I'd never imagined I'd be walking through as a patient's mother, terrified and alone. "Blake Mercer," I gasped at the front desk. The young receptionist, barely out of college from the look of her, typed quickly into her computer. "3rd floor, ma'am. ICU." She looked up with kind eyes. "Take the elevator on your right. ICU, intensive care unit." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd worked ICU for 15 years. I knew what it meant when they kept someone there. I knew the machines, the protocols, the statistics. The elevator crawled upward. Soft jazz played overhead, the same generic music they'd played 8 years ago when Robert was dying 2 floors up in the cancer ward. I'd held his hand as he took his last breath, promising him I'd take care of our children, that I'd be strong. I wasn't feeling very strong right now. When the doors finally opened, I practically stumbled into the hallway. A doctor was waiting, a woman in her 40s with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing navy blue scrubs and an expression of professional calm. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm Dr. Vanessa Hartley." I nodded, unable to speak. "Your son is stable," she said immediately, and I felt my knees weaken with relief. "He was in a car accident on Highway 26. His vehicle hit a guardrail. He sustained a head injury, a concussion, we believe, and we're monitoring him closely for the next 48 to 72 hours. Can I see him?" "Of course, follow me." She led me down a hallway that smelled like floor cleaner and anxiety. We passed rooms with half-open doors, glimpses of people in beds, machines beeping their steady rhythms. Finally, she stopped outside a door. "He's in here. He's awake but groggy. Try to keep him calm." I stepped inside. Blake was lying in the bed, eyes half closed. There was a bandage wrapped around his head, an IV, and his arm monitors attached to his chest. He looked small somehow, vulnerable, not like the confident real estate agent who always had everything under control, who'd bought a new truck last year and taken his family on a cruise to Alaska. "Mom," his voice was rough, tired. "I'm here, honey." I pulled a chair up beside the bed, took his hand in both of mine. His hand felt cold. "I'm right here." "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." He tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "They said I have to stay for a few days. Observation or something." "That's okay. I'll stay with you." "Mom, you don't have to." "I'm staying." He didn't argue, just closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing deepened, and I knew he was asleep. I sat there watching his chest rise and fall, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor, thanking God or whoever was listening that he was alive, that my boy, my precious boy, was still here. The room wasn't large, just enough space for the bed, a chair, a small table with a pitcher of water and plastic cups. There was a curtain dividing the room in half, and on the other side I could hear someone moving. Another patient. Another family story. I glanced at the curtain but didn't say anything. 35 years as a nurse had taught me to respect privacy, to understand that everyone in a hospital room is fighting their own battle. Hours passed. A nurse came in, young woman, maybe 30, with gentle hands and a soft voice. She checked Blake's vitals, adjusted something on the IV, smiled at me. "You doing okay, Mrs. Mercer?" "Yes, thank you. Just glad he's all right." "He's lucky. Head injuries can be tricky, but Dr. Hartley is one of the best." She left, and the room fell quiet again, except for the beeping and the faint sound of traffic outside the window. Night came. The light from the hallway cast long shadows across the floor. I leaned back in the chair, my back aching from sitting, my eyes burning with exhaustion. But I didn't want to leave. Couldn't leave. Not while my son needed me. That's when I heard it. A voice. Quiet. Almost a whisper. "Stay away from him." I froze, my hand still holding Blake's. Looked around. Blake was asleep, his breathing steady. The voice hadn't come from him. "Stay away from him while you still can." My heart started pounding. I stood up slowly, carefully released Blake's hand and walked toward the curtain. Pushed it aside just enough to see. An elderly woman was lying in the bed on the other side. She must have been in her 70s, thin, with white hair spread across the pillow like spider silk, and pale skin that seemed almost translucent under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes were open, staring right at me. Wide, terrified. "Excuse me," I whispered, glancing back at Blake to make sure he was still asleep. She didn't blink, just kept staring with those frightened eyes. "Stay away from him," she said again, her voice trembling. "While you still can." I looked back at Blake, then at her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I think you might be confused. That's my son. He was in an accident." "I know." She shook her head slowly, the movement seeming to cost her great effort. "I know who he is, but you need to listen to me. Stay away from him before it's too late." A chill ran down my spine. In all my years as a nurse, I'd seen patients say strange things. Medication, pain, fear could make people confused. But something about the way she was looking at me, the clarity in her frightened eyes, made me pause. "I don't understand," I said softly. Before she could answer, a nurse came in, different from the one before, older, efficient. She checked something on the woman's chart, adjusted her blanket, and gently pulled the curtain closed again. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the curtain, my heart pounding in my chest. What did she mean? Stay away from Blake, from my own son. I sat back down in my chair, hands gripping the armrests. Tried to shake it off. She was probably on medication. Confused, didn't know what she was saying. But I couldn't stop thinking about her eyes. That fear, that warning. Stay away from him. The next morning I woke up with a stiff neck and a headache that pulsed behind my eyes. I'd spent the night in that hospital chair, dozing off and on, waking every time Blake shifted or a nurse came in. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face, heard her warning. But in the morning light filtering through the window, it seemed less frightening. Just an old woman confused by medication and pain. Nothing to worry about. Blake was awake, groggy but stable. A nurse came in, another young woman I didn't recognize, though I'd worked here for decades, and checked his vitals. Blake asked for water. I helped him drink, holding the cup steady while he took small sips. Around 8 o'clock, the nurse poked her head back in. "Mrs. Mercer, if you want to grab some breakfast now would be a good time. We'll keep an eye on him." My stomach was growling. I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. "I'll be right back," I told Blake. I walked down to the cafeteria, grabbed 2 cups of coffee and a couple of turkey sandwiches wrapped in plastic. On my way back, I stopped outside Blake's room holding those 2 cups of coffee. I thought about the woman in the other bed, the one who'd said those things, the one who'd looked so frightened. I didn't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was 35 years of nursing instinct. Maybe it was loneliness, 8 years of being a widow, of eating dinner alone, of talking to Robert's photograph. Maybe it was just basic human kindness. But I found myself holding those 2 cups of coffee, standing outside the curtain. "Ma'am," I said softly. "Are you awake?" There was a pause. Then yes. I pulled the curtain aside. In the daylight, she looked less frightening, just old, tired, alone. Her white hair was pulled back now, revealing a face lined with age and what looked like years of worry. "I brought you some coffee," I said. "If you want it." She looked at the cup, then at me. For a moment I thought she'd refuse, but then she reached out with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she took it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I got a sandwich too. Turkey." I handed it to her, pulled the visitor's chair closer to her bed. We didn't speak for a while, just sipped our coffee. The silence was comfortable somehow, like 2 people who'd known each other for years instead of strangers separated by a hospital curtain. Finally she said, "I'm Beatrice Halford." "Karen Mercer," I smiled, "but everyone calls me Maggie." "I know your name. I heard the nurse." I looked down at my coffee. "Look, Mrs. Halford, about last night." "I wasn't confused," she said, cutting me off. Her voice was stronger now, more focused. "I know what I said and I meant it. I didn't know how to respond to that." "That's my son in the other bed," I said finally. "Blake. He's 42. He's a good man. Real estate agent. Married, got a beautiful 10-year-old son named Lucas." I paused. "He's all I've got left. Him and my daughter Chelsea. She lives up in Seattle now." Mrs. Halford took a slow sip of her coffee. "Where's your husband?" My throat tightened the way it always did when someone asked about Robert. "He passed away 8 years ago. Cancer." Her face softened. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Silence settled between us again. Then she asked a question that caught me completely off guard. "How does Blake make you feel, Maggie, when you're with him?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. Thought about it. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how does he make you feel when you're together?" I set down my coffee cup, stared at it. "I don't know. Sometimes tired, I guess. Like I'm always trying to keep up, trying to say the right thing." I paused, surprised at my own honesty. "Sometimes I feel small, like I'm taking up too much space in his life." Mrs. Halford didn't say anything, just watched me with those tired, knowing eyes. "But that's normal, right?" I added quickly. "Kids grow up. They don't need you the way they used to. They have their own lives, their own families. I'm just mom now, the person they call on holidays." "A son who loves you doesn't make you feel the way you just described, Maggie." Her words hit me hard. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend Blake, wanted to explain that he was busy, that he had work stress, that being a husband and father was demanding. But I couldn't get the words out. "Blake's not perfect," I said finally. "But he's my son. I carried him for 9 months. I brought him into this world. I nursed him, raised him, loved him. He's part of me." "I'm sure he is." Mrs. Halford set her coffee down, her hands still trembling slightly. "I had a son too, just one like you." I waited, sensing there was more. "He was perfect," she continued. "Smart, charming, successful. He visited me every week, brought me flowers, took care of my bills, my accounts." She paused. "He said he wanted to make my life easier, and I believed him." What happened? I had a fall, ended up in a hospital bed just like this one. She stopped, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. That's when my lawyer called. Said there'd been irregularities with my accounts. My chest tightened. Turns out, she continued each word, seeming to cost her, my son had been transferring money out of my accounts for years. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. By the time I found out, he'd taken nearly everything. My savings, my retirement. Even my house, he'd transferred the deed into his name. Said it was for estate planning. I felt sick. Oh my God! I called the police, she said flatly. He's in prison now, 15 years. I'm so sorry, that's terrible. Don't be sorry for me, Maggie. She looked at me, her eyes sharp now, despite the tears gathering at the corners. Be careful for yourself. Blake's not like that, I said automatically. The words came out defensive, almost angry. He would never listen to me. Mrs. Halford leaned forward slightly, and I saw her wince in pain from the movement. That first night before you came, I was awake when they brought him in. Your son. He was conscious. Groggy, but conscious. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. He made a phone call, she continued. I heard him say your name. Maggie, he said. And then I heard other things. Things about accounts, about houses, about making sure the old lady doesn't find out. The room seemed to tilt. That's when I knew, she said quietly. That's why I had to warn you. I shook my head, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. No, you must have misheard. Blake was groggy, confused. He probably didn't know what he was saying. He knew exactly what he was saying. I stood up, nearly knocking over my chair. You don't know him. You don't know us. Blake's been through a lot lately. Work stress, family stuff. He wouldn't. Maggie. He's my son, I said, my voice cracking. The boy I gave birth to. The boy I raised. He wouldn't do that to me. Mrs. Halford looked at me with something like pity. So was mine. I stood there in that hospital room, breathing hard, my mind racing. Blake on the phone talking about accounts, about the house, about making sure I didn't find out. No, it didn't make sense. Blake didn't need my money. He had his own career, his own life. He'd bought that new truck. He'd taken his family on vacation. He was successful. But then I remembered something. A few months ago, June maybe or July, Blake had asked me about my retirement accounts. Said he wanted to help me organize things, make sure everything was in order. He'd been so thoughtful about it, so concerned. Mom, you're getting older, he'd said, sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open. You need to make sure your finances are protected. Let me help you set up proper accounts, make sure everything's secure. I thought it was sweet, thoughtful. What a good son, caring about his aging mother's finances. Now standing in that hospital room, I wasn't so sure. I know this is hard to hear, Mrs. Halford said gently. I know you don't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe it either when my lawyer first told me. I hung up on him 3 times before I finally agreed to look at the evidence. I sank back into my chair. What evidence? Bank statements, transfer records, emails between my son and his wife planning what they'd do with my house after they handled me. She paused. They used that word, handled, like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person who'd given him life. I felt tears burning in my eyes. Mrs. Halford, You remind me of myself, Maggie, back when I still believed, back when I thought love was enough to protect me from the truth. She reached out, took my hand. Her skin was papery thin, spotted with age. But love isn't enough when someone sees you as an obstacle instead of a mother. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that Blake wasn't like her son, that I wasn't like her, but I couldn't get the words out because somewhere deep down a part of me was starting to wonder. 2 days passed. Blake's condition improved steadily. The doctors were pleased, no complications, no swelling, just rest and observation. By the morning of the 4th day, Dr. Hartley gave him the all clear. You can go home today, Mr. Mercer, she told Blake. But take it easy for the next week. No driving, no strenuous activity, and follow up with your primary care physician in 2 weeks. Blake nodded. Got it. Thanks, Doc. I was standing by the window watching the morning traffic on the street below. Relief washed over me. He was okay. My son was okay. Whatever Mrs. Halford had said, whatever fears had kept me awake the past 2 nights, none of it mattered now. Blake was healthy and going home. "I'll bring the car around," I said, turning to Blake. "Help you get your things together." Blake didn't look up from his phone. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen, typing something. "Actually, Mom Sabrina's on her way. She's going to pick me up." I stopped. "Oh, I thought I'd drive you home." "Nah, it's fine. You've done enough already." He glanced at me briefly, then back at the phone. "You should go home. Get some rest. You look tired." The words stung more than they should have. I'd spent 3 nights in that chair. Barely slept, barely eaten. Worried myself sick over him. And now he was dismissing me like I was an inconvenience. "I don't mind," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to make sure you get home safe." "Mom, I'm fine. Sabrina's got it covered." His tone was sharper now. Not angry exactly, just done. "Seriously, you should go." I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Blake had always been independent. Even as a little boy, he'd insisted on doing things himself, tying his own shoes, making his own lunch. But this felt different. This felt like he was pushing me away. "Okay," I said finally. "If that's what you want." "It is." I grabbed my purse from the chair, checked to make sure I had my keys. "Well, I'll wait until Sabrina gets here at least. Make sure you're all set." Blake sighed, but didn't argue. A nurse came in, went over discharge instructions, handed Blake a folder of paperwork. He signed a few forms, barely reading them. I watched him trying to see past the bandage on his head, past the hospital gown, trying to see my son, the boy I'd raised. But all I saw was a stranger, a 42-year-old man who didn't need me anymore. Maybe that was normal. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe Mrs. Halford's words had gotten into my head, made me suspicious and paranoid. But then I remembered what she'd said. A son who loves you doesn't make you feel the way you just described. 20 minutes later, I heard heels clicking down the hallway. Sharp, quick steps. Expensive shoes on cheap linoleum. Sabrina pushed through the door, her eyes landing on Blake immediately. "Baby, are you okay?" She rushed to his side, took his hand in both of hers. Her nails were perfectly manicured French tips, probably $50 at that salon she always went to. "I'm fine," Blake said, smiling at her. A real smile, the kind he hadn't given me in days. "Ready to get out of here." Sabrina fussed over him, adjusting his collar, smoothing his hair. Her grip on his hand was tight, protective, almost possessive. "Hi, Sabrina," I said. She glanced at me, barely. "Karen. Not Mom, not even Mrs. Mercer. Just Karen. Like I was an acquaintance, a co-worker, not her husband's mother. "Thanks for staying with him," she added, her voice flat. Polite, but cold. "Of course. He's my son." She didn't respond, just turned back to Blake. "Come on, let's get you home. I've got the car running downstairs." Blake stood slowly, a little unsteady. Sabrina wrapped an arm around his waist, supporting him. He leaned into her, and they walked toward the door. I followed them into the hallway, watched as they walked to the elevator. Sabrina pressed the button. The doors opened. They stepped inside. That's when it happened. Sabrina turned, looked at me over Blake's shoulder. Our eyes met. And the look she gave me, it wasn't just cold. It was calculating. Like she was sizing me up. Like I was a problem she was trying to figure out how to solve. Then she leaned in, kissed Blake's cheek. But her eyes never left mine. The elevator doors closed. I stood there in the empty hallway, my heart pounding. Something about that look. Something about the way she'd held him, the way she'd brushed me off. Something was wrong. I could feel it deep in my gut, that same instinct that had helped me save patients during my nursing career. The instinct that told me when something was off, when I needed to call a doctor, when I needed to act fast. Something was very, very wrong. I turned and walked back to Blake's room. The bed was stripped, the sheets gone, the monitors turned off. The room was already empty, like he'd never been there at all. I looked at the curtain dividing the room. Mrs. Halford. I hadn't said goodbye. I walked over, pulled the curtain aside. The bed was empty, stripped clean, just like Blake's. "Excuse me," I said to a passing nurse, a young man in dark blue scrubs. "The woman who was in this bed, Mrs. Halford. Is she—" "Oh, she checked out early this morning," he said. "Around 6, I think. Said she was feeling better and wanted to go home. 6 in the morning, before I'd even woken up." "Did she—" I hesitated. "Did she leave anything? Any message?" The nurse thought for a moment. "I'm not sure. Let me check." He walked into the room, looked around, then pointed to the pillow. "There's something there." I walked over. On the pillow, folded neatly, was a small piece of paper. Hospital stationery. I picked it up, unfolded it. 4 words written in shaky handwriting. "Trust your instincts, Maggie." I stared at the note for a long time, reading it again and again. Trust your instincts. My instincts were screaming at me right now, telling me something was off, telling me to pay attention, to watch, to be careful. But my heart, my mother's heart, was telling me I was being paranoid. That Blake was my son, that Sabrina was just protective, that Mrs. Halford was a stranger who didn't know my family. I folded the note, slipped it into my pocket, and walked out of the room, out of the hospital, into the parking lot. The sun was bright, the air was cool. Portland was waking up around me, people going to work, living their lives. And I stood there in the middle of the parking lot with a note in my pocket and a knot in my stomach. Trust your instincts. But what if my instincts were wrong? What if I was about to ruin everything over nothing? I got in my Honda, drove home. The note burned in my pocket the whole way. A week had passed since Blake left the hospital. A week since I'd stood in that parking lot with Mrs. Halford's note in my pocket. A week of trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Blake hadn't called, hadn't texted. When I reached out to check on him, his responses were short. 1-word answers. Fine. Good. Busy. I told myself he was recovering, adjusting, that I was overthinking things. But Mrs. Halford's words kept echoing in my head. Trust your instincts. That Thursday night I worked late at home. I'd been organizing the garage, sorting through boxes of Robert's old things that I'd been putting off for years. Tools, fishing gear, baseball cards he'd collected as a boy. I told myself I'd finish by bedtime, but midnight came and I was still sorting, still remembering, still missing my husband with an ache that 8 years hadn't dimmed. By the time I finished and dragged myself inside, it was past 3 in the morning. I locked the door, climbed the stairs, brushed my teeth, changed into my nightgown. I was about to turn off the light when I heard something. A car door closing. Quiet, like someone was trying not to wake the neighborhood. I walked to the window, looked out, and my heart stopped. Blake's truck was in my driveway, the new black Ford F-150 he'd been so proud of. I checked the clock. 3:15 a.m. What was Blake doing here at 3:15 in the morning? I grabbed my bathrobe, tied it around my waist, and crept downstairs. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a moment I thought about calling 911, but it was Blake, my son. What would I say? My son is at my house. The house was dark, every light off, but I could hear something, faint, coming from down the hall, from Robert's old office. I stood in the hallway with my hand on the light switch, my heart hammering against my ribs. Blake's car sat outside. The house was dark. I heard whispers. No, not whispers. Rustling. Papers. Drawers opening. I flipped the switch. Light flooded the office. Blake stood by the filing cabinet, one hand gripping an open drawer, the other holding papers. He spun around, eyes wide. "Mom." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Jesus, you scared me." I stepped inside, my legs shaking. "Blake, what are you doing here? It's 3 in the morning. He glanced at the papers in his hand, then back at me. "I was looking for something. Paperwork. The title for my old car. I'm selling it." The filing cabinet drawer was open. Files were pulled forward out of order. My financial records, tax documents, bank statements. At 3 in the morning, my voice came out sharper than I intended. I couldn't sleep. He set the papers on the desk, tried to smile. "Thought I'd take care of it now. Sorry, Mom, I should have called." I studied his face. His hair was messy, but not like he'd been sleeping. He wore jeans and a hoodie, street clothes, not pajamas. "How did you get in? I still have a key from when I lived here." He shrugged. "Hope that's okay." It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay, but I couldn't find the words to say it. "Did you find what you needed?" I managed to ask. "Not yet. I thought it might be in here." He gestured at the cabinet. "But I can come back later, during the day, I mean." "Yeah," I said slowly. "That would be better." He nodded, walked toward the door, then stopped. "You working late tonight?" "I was organizing the garage, lost track of time." "You should get some sleep. You look exhausted." He left. I heard the front door close, heard the engine start, heard the truck pull away. I stood there staring at the open drawer. The files weren't put back properly. Financial documents out of sequence, like someone had searched through them, quickly looking for something specific. I checked the papers Blake had been holding. Blank forms. Nothing important. So what had he really been looking for? I closed the drawer, turned off the light, went back to bed. I didn't sleep. 3 days later, I was cleaning Robert's office. My office now, I supposed, though I still thought of it as his. I did this monthly, organized files, shredded old paperwork, kept things in order. It was a habit from my nursing days where organization could mean the difference between life and death. That's when I noticed it. The financial folders were out of sequence. Documents I kept carefully arranged, bank statements, investment records, retirement accounts, were mixed together like someone had searched through them quickly and put them back wrong. Then I checked my checkbook. It stayed in the top desk drawer, always in the same spot, right-hand corner. I tracked every check number, recorded every transaction in my neat handwriting. 3 checks were missing, not cleanly torn out along the perforations. Ripped, like someone had been in a hurry. My stomach dropped. I opened my laptop, the old Dell Robert had bought me years ago, and logged into my bank account. Providence Bank, where I'd banked since Robert and I got married in 1975. I stared at the screen. There it was. A transfer of $5,000 to Blake Mercer. Dated 2 weeks earlier. I scrolled up. Another transfer. $20,000. Dated in March. Higher. $35,000. Dated in June. $60,000. $60,000. Had I sent him money and forgotten? No. I would remember $60,000. I barely made that much in a year when I was working. The rest of the transactions were normal. Mortgage payment, utilities, groceries at Safeway, prescription refills. All the boring, predictable expenses of a 67-year-old widow living alone. Only those 3 transfers stood out. I picked up my phone, hands shaking, and called the bank. Providence Bank, how can I help you? I need to speak with Lindsay Crawford. My voice came out steadier than I felt. 1 moment, please. Lindsay had handled my account since Robert passed away. She'd helped me navigate the financial chaos of widowhood, helped me understand IRAs and beneficiaries and estate planning. She'd been patient, kind, understanding. Maggie, her voice was warm, familiar. Everything okay? I need to come in today, right now if possible. I have questions about my account. There was a pause. Of course, I can see you at 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Providence Bank sat on Morrison and 3rd, a brick building I'd walked past 1,000 times during my years working at the hospital. I'd banked there for 48 years since Robert and I opened our first joint account as newlyweds in 1975. Lindsay Crawford met me at the door. She was about 50 with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. We'd known each other for 8 years now, ever since she'd helped me sort through Robert's accounts after his death. Maggie, she said, her smile fading when she saw my face. Come to my office. Her office was small but neat. Family photos lined her desk, 2 teenage daughters, a husband in a Navy uniform. A dying, succulent plant sat in the corner, struggling under the fluorescent lights. What's going on? She asked, closing the door behind us. There are transfers in my account I didn't authorize. My voice shook despite my efforts to stay calm. 3 of them. $60,000 total. All to my son Blake. She pulled up my account on her computer, typed quickly, frowned. Yes, I see them here. Authorized on March 15th, June 22nd, and October 3rd. I didn't authorize any of them. Lindsay's frown deepened. Are you sure, Maggie? Sometimes I'm sure. I leaned forward. Lindsay, I worked as a nurse for 35 years. I know my own mind. I track every penny. I would never transfer $60,000 without remembering it. She studied my face, and I saw the moment she believed me. Let me pull up the authorization forms. She printed 3 documents, slid them across the desk. I looked at the first one. My name at the top. Blake's name as the recipient. Amount $20,000. Date March 15th, 2024. And at the bottom, my signature. It looked exactly like mine. The loop in the M the way the A leaned slightly right, the crossed T's. Perfect, but I hadn't signed it. I didn't sign this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maggie, Lindsay's voice was gentle, careful. This is the 3rd transfer this year. My blood ran cold. 3rd, you just showed me 3. She turned her screen toward me. No, look, March $20,000. June 30, $5,000. October, $5,000. My vision started to blur. But you said third transfer. There's a fourth one. She scrolled up. Back in April, $55,000. But that one came from a different account. A joint account under your name and Blake's name. Do you remember opening that? No. She clicked on it. According to this, the account was opened in March. You transferred $55,000 into it from your retirement fund, and then the full amount was withdrawn 2 weeks later. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of her desk. I didn't open any joint account. I didn't transfer any money from my retirement fund. Lindsay's face had gone pale. Maggie, if these signatures are forged, that's serious. That's fraud. That's... She stopped, looked at Blake's name on the screen, said nothing. But I heard what she wasn't saying. That's your son. What do I do? I asked. First, I freeze your accounts, right now. No more transfers without you physically coming into the bank. She typed quickly. Second, I give you copies of everything, every form, every authorization, every transaction. And third, she looked at me, her eyes sad. Third, you talk to a lawyer. And Maggie, she paused. Be careful. She printed the documents, page after page of evidence that my son had stolen from me. I sat there watching the printer spit out my financial records, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my purse. $115,000. That's what he'd taken. $60,000 from my checking account. $55,000 from my retirement fund that Robert and I had scrimped and saved to build over 39 years of marriage. I thought about Blake at 3 a.m, standing in Robert's office searching through my files. He wasn't looking for a car title. He was looking for account numbers, signatures, access. I remembered how he'd asked about my finances months earlier. Mom, you're getting older. Let me help you organize things. And I'd let him. I'd given him access to my filing cabinet, shown him where I kept my important documents. I'd trusted him because he was my son. The boy I'd given birth to during a snowstorm. The boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and broken arms. The boy I'd loved with every fiber of my being for 42 years. Lindsay placed a manila envelope in my hands. Everything's in here. All the documentation. I stood up, my legs weak. Thank you. Maggie. She walked around the desk, put her hand on my arm. I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the most careful, organized people I've ever met. If you say you didn't authorize these transfers, I believe you. Tears burned in my eyes. He's my son. I know. Her voice was soft, full of sympathy I didn't want. I'm sorry. I sat in my Honda in the bank parking lot for I don't know how long, holding that envelope, staring at nothing. $115,000, more than 2 years of Robert's salary when he was working. More than 3 years of my nursing salary. Gone. Stolen. By our son. I pulled out my phone, hands still shaking, and scrolled to Philip Weston's number. Philip had been our family lawyer for 30 years. He'd handled Robert's will, helped me with the estate paperwork, drafted my own will 3 years ago. He was more than a lawyer. He was a friend. But before I could call him, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me click accept. Mrs. Mercer, Maggie. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yes. This is Providence Portland Medical Center. I'm calling from patient services. We have some of Mrs. Beatrice Halford's personal effects that she left behind. She listed you as someone who should receive them. Would you be able to come pick them up? I sat up straighter. Mrs. Halford, is she okay? She's fine, ma'am. She just forgot a few items when she checked out. Can you come by today? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove to the hospital in a daze, parked in the visitor's lot, walked through those sliding glass doors for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. The receptionist directed me to patient services on the 1st floor. A young woman with a name tag that said Jennifer handed me a small plastic bag. Inside was a paperback book, a pair of reading glasses, and a small box. That's everything she left, Jennifer said. She specifically asked that you receive these. Thank you. I walked back to my car, sat behind the wheel, and opened the box. Inside was a watch, silver tarnished old, a man's watch, and the hands were frozen, stopped at exactly 3:15. There was a note underneath it written in the same shaky handwriting as before, Maggie. My husband gave me this watch before he passed away 20 years ago. It stopped working the day I realized what my son had done to me. I was sitting in my lawyer's office looking at the bank statements, and I looked down at this watch, and it had stopped. 3:15. The exact moment everything became clear. Sometimes we need to stop, to pause, to see things as they really are, not as we wish they were. This watch stopped at the moment I saw the truth. Keep it. It will remind you when the time comes. You are stronger than you know. Trust yourself. Beatrice. I sat there holding that watch, feeling its weight in my palm. The hands frozen at 3:15. The same time Blake had been in my house searching through my files. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a warning. A reminder. Sometimes we need to stop. I slipped the watch into my pocket next to the note she'd left me at the hospital, and I called Philip Weston. Philip's office was downtown in a brick building that smelled like old books and wood polish. His assistant, a woman named Carol, who'd been with him for 20 years, waved me through immediately. "Maggie, he's expecting you. Go right in." Philip stood when I entered. He was 72, with white hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He'd been Robert's lawyer first back in the 80s when Robert was starting his construction business. Then, he'd become our family lawyer. He'd been at our wedding anniversary parties, our children's graduations. He'd held my hand at Robert's funeral. "Maggie." He came around the desk, took both my hands in his. "Carol said you sounded upset on the phone. What's happened?" So I told him. Everything. Mrs. Halford's warning at the hospital. Blake showing up at 3:15 in the morning. The missing checks. The bank meeting with Lindsay. The forged signatures. The $115,000. When I finished, Philip didn't say anything for a long moment. He just sat back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Have you confronted Blake about any of this?" he finally asked. "No." "Good." He leaned forward. "Maggie, I've known you for 30 years. If you think something's wrong, it probably is. But right now you don't have enough. You have suspicions. You have transfers you don't remember authorizing. But Blake will have explanations. He'll say you forgot. He'll say you signed something without reading it carefully. He'll make you doubt yourself. So what do? You gather evidence, real evidence. Before you confront him, you need to know everything." Philip reached for his phone. "I'm going to give you a name. Simon Vaughn. He's a private investigator. Discreet professional, very good at what he does. He's helped several of my clients in situations like this." A private investigator. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Wrong. "To follow my own son. To protect yourself," Philip said quietly. "That's what this is about now, Maggie. Protection." I thought about Mrs. Halford, about how she'd said the exact same thing, how she'd warned me to be careful, to protect myself, to trust my instincts. "Okay," I said. "Give me his number." I met Simon Vaughn the next day at a coffee shop near the waterfront. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of face that could blend into a crowd. Brown hair, average height, wearing jeans and a plain jacket. Nothing flashy, nothing memorable. We sat in a corner booth away from the other customers. "So," Simon said, pulling out a small notebook. Philip filled me in on the basics. Unauthorized transfers, forged signatures, $115,000 over several months. "Tell me about Blake." I took a breath and told him everything I knew. Blake was 42, a real estate agent married to Sabrina for 12 years. They had a son, Lucas, who was 10. They lived in Beaverton, about 20 minutes away. Blake drove a new black Ford F-150. He and Sabrina always seemed comfortable, nice clothes vacations, Lucas in private school. "But you don't know his financials," Simon said. "No, I never asked." "Any signs of trouble? Debt gambling, expensive habits?" I thought about it. Thought about the new truck Blake had bought last year. He'd mentioned it was fully loaded, top of the line. Thought about the Alaska cruise they'd taken last summer. Thought about Sabrina's designer handbags, the ones I'd seen when they came for Sunday dinner. "I don't know," I admitted. "I never thought to look." Simon made a note. "That's what I'm here for. I'll start with financial records, public records, property liens, court filings. I'll watch his movements, see where he goes, who he talks to. I'll keep it quiet. He won't know I'm there." "How long will it take?" "Depends on what I find. Could be a few days, could be longer." He met my eyes. "But if there's something there, Mrs. Mercer, I'll find it." That night I sat in Robert's office and went through every financial document I could find. Bank statements going back 5 years, retirement account statements, investment portfolios, tax returns. That's when I saw it. A joint account I didn't recognize. Providence Bank account number ending in 4782. Opened March 2024 in my name and Blake's name. I called the customer service number, navigated through the automated system, finally reached a real person. Providence Bank, this is Daniel. How can I help you? I'm calling about account number ending in 4782. I need to know the current balance. Can I have your name and last 4 digits of your social security number? I gave them to him. Waited while he typed. Mrs. Mercer, yes, I see the account here. Joint ownership with Blake Mercer. Opened March 14th of this year. What's the current balance? 0, ma'am. My heart sank. 0, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. There was a transfer in of $55,000 from your retirement fund on April 2nd and a withdrawal of the full amount on April 16th. 2 weeks later, the room started spinning. $55,000 from my retirement fund, the one Robert and I had built over decades of careful saving, transferred into an account I didn't know existed, then emptied out 2 weeks later. Thank you, I managed to say and hung up. I sat at Robert's desk holding Mrs. Halford's watch. The hands frozen at 3:15. My phone buzzed. A text from Simon Vaughn. Need to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., same place. Found something. It's worse than you think. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, holding Robert's pillow, wishing he was there to tell me what to do. Robert always knew what to do. He'd been my rock for 39 years, and 8 years after his death, I still reached for him in the dark. The next morning, I drove to the coffee shop. Simon was already there, sitting in the same corner booth with a thick folder in front of him bound with rubber bands. I slid into the seat across from him. What did you find? He opened the folder. The first thing I saw were photographs. Blake walking into a casino. The Fortune Casino, it was called. Big neon signs, a parking lot full of cars. And there was Blake walking through those doors like he owned the place. Simon spread out more photos. Blake at a poker table. Blake at a blackjack table. Blake leaving at 2 a.m. with his head down, shoulders slumped, looking defeated. He's been going 3-4 times a week, Simon said. For the last 6 months at least. Probably longer. I stared at the photos. That was definitely Blake. His truck. His jacket. My son. How much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Simon pulled out a stack of papers. Receipts, documents, names I didn't recognize. He owes $150,000 to predatory lenders, the kind of people who charge 20% interest per month. $150,000 on top of the $115,000 he'd stolen from me. He's got about 3 months, Simon continued, before they start coming after collateral. His house, his truck, his assets. These aren't banks, Mrs. Mercer. These are dangerous people. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process it. My son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd taught right from wrong, owed $150,000 to loan sharks and had stolen from his own mother to try to pay them off. There's more, Simon said quietly. He pulled out printed emails. These are from Blake's cloud backup. Communications between him and Sabrina. I looked at the first one. From Blake Mercer to Sabrina Mercer. Subject, we need to talk. Date, September 3rd, 2024. We have to deal with the old lady. She's sitting on a gold mine and doesn't even know it. The house is paid off. Retirement accounts. Everything. If we can get the deed, we're set. We can pay off the debt and start over. The old lady. He called me the old lady. I had to stop reading. Put the paper down. Breathe. Simon pointed to the next email. Sabrina's response. From Sabrina Mercer to Blake Mercer. Date September 3rd, 2024. How she's not just going to hand it over. And Blake's reply. Leave that to me. She trusts me. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. She won't even realize until it's too late. I felt tears streaming down my face. Couldn't stop them. Didn't even try. I'm sorry, Maggie, Simon said. I know this is hard. Is there more? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I could handle more. He nodded, pulled out a small digital recorder. This is from 3 nights ago. Blake was at a bar near the casino talking to someone. I was sitting at the next table. He pressed play. Bar noise. Glasses clinking. People talking. And then Blake's voice, clear as day. My old lady, yeah, she's loaded. House paid off. Retirement fund. The works. Once I get my hands on that deed, I'm golden. Someone laughed. Asked him, You really gonna do that to your own mom? And Blake, my son, the boy I'd carried for 9 months, the boy I'd loved more than my own life, said, She's 67. What's she need a house for anyway? She'll be fine in some assisted living place. And I'll finally be out of this hole. Simon stopped the recording. I sat there in that coffee shop surrounded by strangers going about their normal lives and felt my entire world collapse. Philip was waiting when Simon and I arrived at his office an hour later. We spread everything out on his conference table. The photos, the emails, the bank statements, the recording. Philip looked at it, all his face grim. This is serious, Maggie. Very serious. We're not just talking about fraud anymore. We're talking about conspiracy financial exploitation of an elder identity theft. What do I do? I asked. We need to act fast. Philip pulled out a legal pad, started making notes. First, we freeze everything. Every account, every asset. We transfer your remaining funds into a new account that Blake doesn't know about. We change all your passwords, all your PINs. We make it impossible for him to access anything. What about the house? I asked. He wanted the deed. We'll check the property records, make sure he hasn't already filed anything. If he has, we file a challenge immediately. If he hasn't, we add additional security measures. Maybe transfer it into a trust. And Blake, Philip looked at me. Eventually you're going to have to confront him, but not yet. Not until we have everything documented, everything protected. Because once you confront him, Maggie, this is going to get ugly. He's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Simon leaned forward. There's one more thing you should know, Mrs. Mercer. I checked Blake's browser history, his GPS records. He's been researching life insurance policies, specifically policies on elderly parents. My blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying your son isn't just trying to steal from you. He's looking at you as a potential source of income after you're gone. Maybe even... He trailed off, but I understood what he wasn't saying. Maybe even hastening that timeline. I thought about the brakes on my Honda, how they'd been squeaking lately, making strange noises. How Blake had offered to take my car to his mechanic. Get it checked out for you, Mom. I'd said no, that I'd do it myself. But what if I'd said yes? I want to protect what's left, I said quietly. My house, my savings, the little bit of Robert's legacy that's still mine. I looked at Philip, then at Simon. Can you help me? Yes, Philip said without hesitation. But Maggie, you need to understand something. This isn't just about protecting your assets anymore. This is about protecting your life. That evening I sat in Robert's office, my office staring at the phone. I needed to call Chelsea. My daughter deserved to know what was happening. But how do you tell your daughter that her brother is stealing from you? That her brother, her only sibling, had called you the old lady and was planning to take everything you owned? I picked up the phone, dialed her number. She answered on the third ring. Mom, hi, how are you? Her voice was so bright, so happy. She had no idea what was coming. Chelsea, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about Blake. There was a pause. What about him? So I told her. Everything. The hospital, Mrs. Halford's warning, the $115,000, the gambling debt, the emails with Sabrina, the recording. All of it. When I finished, there was silence. Long, heavy silence. Then I heard her crying. Mom, her voice was shaking. I'm so sorry. I should have seen something. It's not your fault, Chelsea. But I should have been there. I should have been helping you instead of... She broke down completely. Chelsea, listen to me. I used my firm voice, the one I'd used when she was a teenager trying to sneak out at midnight. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. Blake made his choices. Bad choices. And now we have to deal with them. She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice changed, got stronger. I'm coming home. Tonight. I'm getting in my car and I'm driving down from Seattle right now. Chelsea, you don't have to. I'm coming home, Mom. You're not facing this alone. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Good tears this time. Thank you, baby. I'll be there by midnight. Keep the guest room ready. After I hung up, I sat there in the quiet house holding Mrs. Halford's watch, the hands frozen at 3:15. The moment of truth. The moment everything stopped to reveal reality. I looked at Robert's photograph on the desk, taken at our 35th wedding anniversary 4 years before the cancer. He was smiling his arm around me, looking at the camera like he had everything in the world he could ever want. Robert, I whispered to the photograph, our son is trying to destroy me, our Blake. The boy we raised together, the boy we loved so much. How did we not see this coming? How did I fail him so completely? The photograph didn't answer, of course, but in my heart I heard Robert's voice the way he used to talk when one of the kids was in trouble. You didn't fail him, Maggie. He made his own choices. Now you make yours. I picked up the watch, held it up to the light. 3:15. It was time to stop, time to see clearly, time to protect myself, even if it meant losing my son. Chelsea arrived at 11:47 p.m. I heard her car in the driveway, saw the headlights sweep across the living room curtains. She came through the door with 2 suitcases and immediately wrapped me in her arms. "Oh, Mom," she said, and we both cried. My daughter, my baby girl, the one who'd moved to Seattle to chase her dreams, who called me every Sunday, who sent me funny memes and photos of her life, who'd never asked me for anything except love and support. "I'm here now," she said, holding me tight. "And I'm not leaving until this is over." 2 weeks passed, quiet weeks. Chelsea stayed with me, sleeping in her old bedroom, the one with pale blue walls and the window that looked out over the backyard. We fell into a routine. Morning coffee together, sorting through my finances, making sure everything was locked down. Evening walks around the neighborhood. She helped me change all my passwords, set up 2-factor authentication on everything, install security cameras around the house. She organized my documents, created backup copies, stored everything in a safe deposit box at the bank. "Blake's not going to touch another penny," she said fiercely. "Not while I'm here." Philip was filing paperwork. Simon was continuing to monitor Blake's activities. And I was waiting. Waiting for Blake to realize his access had been cut off. Waiting for him to call. On day 15, my phone rang. Blake's name on the screen. Chelsea and I looked at each other across the kitchen table. "Answer it," she said. "Be normal. Act like nothing's wrong." I took a breath. Answered. "Hello?" "Hey, Mom." Blake's voice was warm, friendly. Normal. Like he hadn't stolen $115,000 from me. Like he hadn't called me the old lady and plotted to take my house. "How are you feeling?" "I'm good, Blake. How are you?" "Better. The concussion's cleared up. Doctor says I'm back to normal." He paused. "Listen, Mom, I hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a bind. Work's been slow lately. I need to borrow some money. Maybe $20,000, $30,000 to be safe. Just until I close a few deals. I'll pay you back. I promise." Chelsea's hand tightened around her coffee cup. Her knuckles went white. $20,000 on top of the $115,000 he'd already taken without asking. On top of the accounts he'd drained. On top of the joint account I'd never agreed to open. I looked at Chelsea. She shook her head hard. But I heard myself say, "How much do you need?" $30,000 would be safer. Just to give me some breathing room. I closed my eyes. Thought about Mrs. Halford. About Philip's advice. About Simon's evidence. About the recording of Blake saying I'd be fine in some assisted living place. "Come by tomorrow," I said. "Around 2 o'clock, we'll talk." There was a pause. Then, "Really, Mom, thank you so much. You're saving my life. I'll see you tomorrow." He hung up. Chelsea stared at me. "Mom, what are you doing?" I looked at her. At my daughter who'd dropped everything to come protect me. And I made a decision. "I'm going to confront him," I said. "Tomorrow, with Philip and Simon there as witnesses. I'm going to show him the evidence. I'm going to give him one chance to tell me the truth, to explain himself, to apologize, and make this right. And if he doesn't," I picked up Mrs. Halford's watch, looked at the frozen hands, 3:15. "Then I do what I have to do to protect myself." The next afternoon at 1:45 p.m., Philip and Simon arrived at my house. Chelsea let them in, set up a recording device on the living room table. At exactly 2 o'clock p.m., Blake's truck pulled into the driveway. I stood at the window watching him walk up the path. My son, my boy, the child I'd given life to 42 years ago, the man who was trying to destroy me. Chelsea squeezed my hand. "You've got this, Mom." The doorbell rang. I opened the door. "Hey, Mom." Blake smiled at me, that same warm smile he'd had since he was a little boy. "Thanks for seeing me." "Come in, Blake. We need to talk." Blake stepped into the living room, and for a moment everything felt normal, like any other Sunday afternoon when he'd come over for lunch, like the hundreds of times before when he'd walked through that door as my son, not as a stranger planning to rob me. He stopped when he saw Chelsea sitting on the couch. "Chelsea, what are you doing here?" His smile faltered just slightly. "I live in Seattle, Blake. I'm allowed to visit Mom." Her voice was cold, controlled. Then he saw Philip standing by the window, and Simon near the fireplace with a folder in his hands. Blake's expression changed. Confusion, then wariness. "Mom, what's going on? I thought we were just going to talk about—" "Sit down, Blake." I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "I don't understand. Why is your lawyer here? Who's that guy? Sit down." Something in my tone made him listen. He sat on the edge of the armchair, hands on his knees, looking between all of us. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's this about?" I stood in front of him, my hands clasped together to stop them from shaking. Behind me, I felt Chelsea's presence, Philip's quiet support, Simon's watchful observation. "Blake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Okay." He drew out the word confused. "Have you taken money from my accounts?" His face went blank. "What, yeah? Have you taken money from my bank accounts without my permission?" "Mom, no, of course not. Why would you even ask me that?" I looked at him, at my son, the boy I'd taught to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to tell the truth, and I saw him lie to my face without hesitation. "Blake, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I'm going to give you a chance to be honest with me. Have you taken money from my accounts?" "No." His voice rose, offended now. "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but I would never steal from you. You're my mother. I love you." Philip stepped forward. "Mrs. Mercer, perhaps I should—" "Show him," I said quietly. Simon opened his folder, pulled out the first bank statement, set it on the coffee table in front of Blake. "March 15th, Simon said. "Transfer of $20,000 from Karen Mercer to Blake Mercer. Authorization form signed by Karen Mercer." Blake looked at it. I don't know what this is." "June 22nd. Simon continued, laying down another statement. $35,000. Same authorization, same signature. "Mom, I didn't—" "October 3rd, $5,000. I don't understand where these are coming from." "And April 2nd. Simon's voice was harder now. "A joint account opened in March under Karen Mercer and Blake Mercer's names. $55,000 transferred from Mrs. Mercer's retirement fund, the entire amount withdrawn 2 weeks later." Blake's face had gone pale. "I can explain." $115,000, I said. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "You've taken $115,000 from me over the past 7 months, Blake, with forged signatures, without my knowledge, without my permission." "Mom, no, you're confused. You authorized those transfers. Remember, we talked about it. You said you wanted to help me with the business. I never authorized anything." My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by anger that was finally breaking through the hurt. "I would remember giving you $115,000, Blake. I worked as a nurse for 35 years. I'm not senile. I'm not confused. I know my own accounts." Blake stood up, ran his hands through his hair. "This is crazy. Mom, someone's obviously made a mistake. Maybe the bank—" "The bank has copies of the authorization forms," Philip said. "All with your mother's forged signature, all transferring money to you." "I didn't forge anything." Blake's voice was loud, now defensive. "If Mom signed something and doesn't remember, that's not my fault. She's getting older. Maybe she—" "Don't." Chelsea stood up, her voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare try to gaslight her. Don't you dare suggest she's losing her memory when you know exactly what you did." Blake turned to her. "Chelsea, stay out of this. This is between me and Mom." "No, it's not anymore." She walked over, stood beside me. "Keep going, Mom. Show him the rest." I nodded to Simon. He pulled out the photographs. Blake at the Fortune Casino, walking through the entrance, at the poker tables, at blackjack, leaving at 2 a.m, looking defeated. Blake stared at the photos, his jaw clenching. "You had me followed." "You're a gambling addict," Simon said matter-of-factly. "You've been going to the Fortune Casino 3 to 4 times a week for at least 6 months. You owe $150,000 to predatory lenders who charge 20% interest per month. You have approximately 3 months before they come after your assets." That's private. You had no right. You had no right to steal from your mother," Chelsea shot back. Blake's face was red now, angry, cornered. "I was going to pay her back. All of it. I just needed time to—" To what? I asked. To take more. To drain my accounts completely. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I blinked them back. Blake, if you needed money, why didn't you just ask me? Why didn't you tell me you were in trouble? Because I knew you'd judge me. I knew you'd give me that disappointed look, that how could you speech. I knew you'd tell me to get help to stop gambling So instead you stole from me. My voice broke. Instead you forged my signature and took everything your father and I worked for, everything we saved for 40 years. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Blake? Explain it to me. Make me understand how my son, the boy I gave birth to, could do this to his own mother. He was pacing now, trapped, looking for a way out. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Sabrina expects a certain lifestyle. Lucas is in private school. The mortgage, the truck payments, So you decided to solve your problems by destroying me. Simon pulled out more papers. The emails. He read the first one aloud. We have to deal with the old lady. She's sitting on a gold mine and doesn't even know it. Blake's face went white. The old lady, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. That's what you call me, your mother. The woman who carried you for 9 months, who raised you, who loved you. I'm just the old lady to you. Mom, I didn't mean that. I was frustrated. I didn't. Simon continued reading. If we can get the deed, we're set. We can pay off the debt and start over. And here's your response. She trusts me. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. She won't even realize until it's too late. Blake lunged forward, tried to grab the papers. Philip stepped between them. That's enough, Blake. Sit down. You have no right to read my private emails. You have no right to defraud your mother. Philip's voice was sharp, authoritative. Sit down before I call the police right now. Blake sat, but his hands were clenched into fists. The friendly, apologetic mask was cracking. Something darker was showing through. There's more, Simon said quietly. He pulled out the small recorder. This is from 3 nights ago. Rosie's bar near the casino. He pressed play. Blake's voice filled the room. My old lady, yeah, she's loaded. House paid off. Retirement fund. The works. Once I get my hands on that deed, I'm golden. The other voice. You really going to do that to your own mom? Blake's laugh. Cold. Callous. She's 67. What's she need a house for anyway? She'll be fine in some assisted living place. And I'll finally be out of this hole. Simon stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at my son, at this man who wore Blake's face, but whose words I didn't recognize, who talked about putting me in a nursing home and taking my house like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person who'd loved him unconditionally for 42 years. Blake, I said, my voice shaking, is that really how you see me, as just a source of money, a gold mine to be excavated? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Look at me. My voice rose sharp and commanding. Look at your mother and tell me the truth. Is that how you really feel? Blake's head snapped up, and when he looked at me, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. Something that made me take a step back. You want the truth? His voice was different now. Harder. Fine. Here's the truth, Mom. You sit in this house, Dad's house, the one he paid for with his construction business, and you act like you're struggling. You ration your medications. You talk about choosing between groceries and utilities. But you're sitting on $500,000 in assets. The house alone is worth $400,000. Your retirement accounts, your savings, you have money, Mom. Lots of it. And you're just sitting on it. I stared at him, shocked. That money is for my future. For medical care. For what? For Lucas's college. Oh wait, you already set up a trust fund for him. For Chelsea. She doesn't need it. She's got her own career. So who's it for, Mom? What are you saving it for? You're 67 years old. How many more years do you realistically have? Each word hit me like a physical blow. Blake, Chelsea started, but he talked over her. I'm drowning, Mom. I'm $150,000 in debt to people who will hurt my family if I don't pay them. I've got a wife, a son, a mortgage responsibilities. And you're sitting here with enough money to solve all my problems, but you won't help me because what? Because I didn't ask nicely enough, because I made some mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, Philip said coldly. You committed fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation of an elder. These are felonies, Blake. I was desperate, so you decided to steal from your own mother. I found my voice again. Blake, if you'd come to me, if you'd told me the truth, told me you were in trouble, I would have helped you. I would have found a way. But instead you lied to me. You forged my signature. You planned to take my house. You called me the old lady and talked about putting me in a nursing home like I'm garbage to be disposed of. I never said that. I heard the recording, Blake. We all did. He stood up, started pacing like a caged animal. You're twisting everything. You're making it sound worse than it is. I was just venting. I was stressed. I didn't mean... What about the life insurance policies? Simon asked quietly. Blake froze. What I looked at Simon. Your son has been researching life insurance policies, specifically policies on elderly parents, high-value policies with the adult child as beneficiary. The room went completely still. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Blake, tell me that's not true. He didn't answer. Blake, tell me you weren't planning to... I couldn't even finish the sentence. The thought was too horrible. It was just research, he exploded. I was just looking at options. You're all acting like I'm some kind of monster, but I'm just trying to survive. I made some bad bets, got in over my head, and instead of helping me your own son, you judge me and investigate me and treat me like a criminal. You are a criminal, Chelsea shouted. You stole $115,000 from her. You forged her signature. You planned to take her house. Blake turned on her, his face twisted with anger. Oh, that's rich coming from you, Chelsea. Perfect little Chelsea who moved away, who only calls once a week, who abandoned Mom when Dad died. Where were you when she was lonely? Where were you when she needed help? I was here. I was the one taking care of things. Taking care of things? Chelsea's voice was shaking. Is that what you call stealing from her? I was managing her affairs, making sure her finances were organized, making sure you could steal from her more easily. Chelsea moved toward him, and Philip stepped between them. Everyone calm down, Philip said firmly, but I barely heard him. I was staring at Blake at my son and seeing a stranger, someone I didn't know, someone I wasn't sure I'd ever really known. Blake, I said quietly, do you have any idea what you've done? Not just the money, not just the forged signatures. Do you understand what you've destroyed? He looked at me, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, regret, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by defensiveness. I haven't destroyed anything. You're the one making this into a huge drama. If you just help me, if you just give me the money, none of this would be necessary. Give you the money? I repeated, disbelieving. Blake, you've already taken $115,000. How much more do you want? All of it. My entire life savings, my house. What about my future? What about my medical care? What about... You'll be fine, he said dismissively. You've got good insurance. And if something happens, you can move in with Chelsea in Seattle. Or I'll find you a nice assisted living facility. A nice assisted living facility, I repeated slowly. After you've taken everything I have. After you've stolen my security, my independence, my peace of mind. Mom, you're being dramatic. Get out. My voice was loud, sharp, final. Blake stared at me. What, get out of my house? Now. Mom, come on, we're family. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't forge signatures and drain bank accounts. Family doesn't talk about their mother like she's an inconvenience to be handled. Tears were streaming down my face now, but my voice was steady, strong. You're not my son. My son wouldn't do this. My son is gone, and I want you out of my house. You don't mean that? I mean every word. Get out. Now. Before I call the police and have you arrested for fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. Blake's face went red. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other. Mother and son. Except we weren't that anymore. We were victim and predator. Target and thief. Fine. Blake's voice was cold now. Controlled, dangerous. Fine, but you're making a huge mistake, Mom. You think you're protecting yourself. You're just isolating yourself. Chelsea will go back to Seattle. Your fancy lawyer will send you a bill, and you'll be all alone in this big house wondering why your son doesn't call anymore. He walked toward the door, but stopped before leaving, turned back. You know what Dad would say if he could see this. He'd be ashamed of you. For turning your back on your own son, for choosing money over family. The words hit me like a slap. I actually flinched. Chelsea surged forward. How dare you? But I held up my hand, stopping her. I walked over to Blake, looked up at him. My son, who was now taller than me, stronger than me, but not better than me. Your father, I said quietly, would be ashamed of you, for what you've become, for what you've done to the family he worked so hard to build, for betraying the values he taught you. Don't you dare speak for him. Don't you dare use his memory to manipulate me. Blake's jaw clenched. I need that money, Mom. The people I owe, they're dangerous. If I don't pay them, that's not my problem. They could hurt Sabrina. They could hurt Lucas. Then you should have thought of that before you gambled away $150,000. My voice was ice. You made your choices, Blake. Now you live with the consequences. So you're just going to let your grandson suffer, let your daughter-in-law... Don't. Philip stepped forward. Don't threaten this family, Blake. Don't imply that your mother has any responsibility for the mess you created. Because if anything happens to anyone in this family, the police will know exactly where to look. Blake looked at all of us. Me, Chelsea, Philip, Simon. Saw that we were united. That he was alone. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Not a plea. A promise. Then he walked out. The door slammed so hard that a picture fell off the wall. The glass shattered. I looked down. It was a photo of Blake's kindergarten graduation. He was 5 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera. Robert and I stood behind him, smiling proud, loving. Such a long time ago. Chelsea knelt down, started picking up the glass. Don't, honey, I said. Leave it. I'll clean it up later. Philip put his hand on my shoulder. Maggie, I need you to listen carefully. What Blake just said, you'll regret this, that could be construed as a threat. Combined with the life insurance research, the financial desperation, the dangerous people he owes money to. I'm concerned for your safety. You think he'd actually hurt me? I looked at the door Blake had just walked through. He's my son. He was your son, Simon corrected gently. The person who just left threatened you, and desperate people do desperate things. I sank down onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. All the adrenaline that had kept me strong during the confrontation drained away, leaving me hollow. Chelsea sat beside me, took my hand. Mom, maybe you should stay with me in Seattle for a while. Just until no. I looked at her. This is my house. Mine and Robert's. I'm not being driven out of my own home by my own son. Then we increase security, Philip said. New locks, alarm system, security cameras, and I'm filing a restraining order first thing Monday morning. A restraining order, I repeated. Against Blake. Against the man who threatened you. Yes. I looked down at my hands. 67 years old. Hands that had held my babies, that had held my husband as he died, that had saved countless patients during my nursing career. Strong hands. Capable hands. But they were shaking now. Chelsea squeezed them. It's going to be okay, Mom. We're going to get through this. But Blake knew where I lived. He had a key which we'd need to change. He knew my routines, my habits. He knew I was alone except for Chelsea, who would eventually have to go back to Seattle. And he owed $150,000 to dangerous people. And he'd been researching life insurance policies on elderly parents. Philip, I said quietly, what do we do now? We spent the next hour at my kitchen table planning. Philip took notes on his yellow legal pad. Simon reviewed security options on his tablet. Chelsea held my hand. First priority is physical security, Simon said. I'll have a company here tomorrow to change all the locks, install a comprehensive alarm system, motion-activated cameras at all entry points, maybe some lighting upgrades for the exterior. Second, financial security, Philip added. We've already frozen your accounts, but I want to set up additional safeguards. 2-factor authentication on everything, alerts for any attempted access. And we should probably move your most important documents to a safe deposit box. What about Blake? Chelsea asked. Do we just wait for him to try something? Philip and Simon exchanged a look. What? I asked. What aren't you telling me? Simon leaned forward. Mrs. Mercer, I've been monitoring Blake's activities for 2 weeks now. I know his patterns, his habits, his associates. And based on what I've seen combined with his financial desperation and that threat he just made, I don't think he's going to just walk away. What do you think he'll do? I think he'll try again. Maybe break in looking for documents he can use. Maybe try to access your accounts from a different angle. Maybe... He paused. Maybe something more drastic. Like what? Simon didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "How are your car brakes, Mrs. Mercer?" My blood ran cold. "What, your Honda? When's the last time you had the brakes checked?" I don't know. A few months ago, maybe." Then I remembered. Blake offered to take it to his mechanic. Said he'd noticed they were squeaking. But I said no. "Good," Simon said, "because I'd bet money that if you'd said yes, something unfortunate would have happened to those brakes." Chelsea made a small sound. "Oh my God. You think he'd—" "I think Blake is desperate, and desperate people rationalize desperate actions." Simon looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer, I think we need to be proactive here. We need to document everything Blake does from this point forward, and if he tries something when he tries something, we need to catch him in the act." "How?" I asked. Philip set down his pen. "We set a trap." The watch 140:00 to 142:00. That night, after Philip and Simon left after Chelsea went upstairs to make phone calls to her work, explaining why she wouldn't be back yet, I sat alone in the living room. I pulled out Mrs. Halford's watch. The silver watch with hands frozen at 3:15. 3:15 in the morning. The time Blake had broken into my house searching through my files. 3:15. The time everything stopped so I could see the truth. I thought about Mrs. Halford alone in a nursing home, now her son in prison for 15 years. I thought about how she'd warned me, how she'd tried to save me from the same fate. Sometimes we need to stop, to pause, to see things as they really are, not as we wish they were. I'd stopped. I'd seen the truth. My son, my baby boy, the child I'd brought into this world, wanted to destroy me for money. And now I had to decide, was I going to let him? Was I going to be a victim, or was I going to fight back? I looked at Robert's photograph on the mantel. "What would you do?" I whispered to it. "How do I handle this?" But I already knew the answer. Robert would tell me to protect myself, to protect Chelsea, to protect what we'd built together over 39 years of marriage. He would tell me to be strong. I picked up my phone, called Philip. "Philip," I said when he answered. "That trap you mentioned, let's do it. Whatever it takes, let's catch Blake before he can hurt anyone else." There was a pause. Then, "Are you sure, Maggie?" I looked at the watch, at the frozen hands, at 3:15. "I'm sure." The next morning, Chelsea found me in the kitchen at 6 a.m., already dressed coffee maid, sitting at the table with my hands wrapped around a mug. "Mom, you okay?" "Blake's going to try something," I said. "Soon. Simon's right. He's desperate, he's cornered, and those loan sharks are going to start demanding payment. He needs money, and I'm his only source. So what do we do?" I looked up at her. My daughter, my baby girl. The one who'd never betrayed me, never stolen from me, never seen me as anything but her mother. "We wait," I said. They said. "And when he makes his move, we'll be ready." 3 days later, my phone rang. Blake's name on the screen. Chelsea, who was making lunch, froze. "Don't answer it." But I did. "Mom," Blake's voice was different, softer, contrite. "Mom, I'm so sorry. About everything. I was wrong. So wrong. Can we talk?" "Please, I need to see you. I need to apologize properly." I looked at Chelsea. She was shaking her head, mouthing no, no, no. But I said, "Okay, Blake, come over. We'll talk." Because the trap was set, and it was time to catch a predator.